Kayaaní yuxsatini ldakát Johan. Gulchish wujin khasati. Ya tlaik Sunday ak. Hechosaku asaad kakwane. Gul nawea du toasaku yi outlatu. Khatqa Princeton at de ḳuhātīn. Ya museum hechosaku asagachtusa. Ldakāt at daakahídi. Ya awa. Yechwajian at daakahídi aqoa ldakāt at uste aayí. Ya awa adatyu tuchtatan. Ya ha llilkohas aayí. Museum ʻakananeek. Wan qanins tlallkadeenach tua oshko hastu ʻutii ya ha aayí. Qanachawe a atina khayati. Tlayatke. Tlaynacha ya ʻkhuni. Kayaaní. Icht jishagun achjiu. Khatqa ha wasa. Ye owa wasa at kakwane aan. Just has away we icht. Hastu aayí tin. Gul kalkitayi yechwaji ḳuhá. As cut away. Haswudustatayan taakw. Ldakāt hastu jishaguni hastu inchwasatiyan. Taakw ʻakananeek Emmons yiduasak. Has awaskuwan guksa icht aayí. Has aawatáw. Gwashachawe ishanawe uhan. Ya icht hastu jishaguni tin. Yeg aya qurte haswu da aten. Yewa adatu tuchtatan. Hastu inuch achtatan adat. Gwash chagudach aayí hastu jiwu. Gwash llaqt. Chagudach llaqt. Yewa we wasatu asago at qajin kajaku. Artist yidu asak ldakāt. Akhu awe Johan yisaku. Adekadu chaukia. Kadushhitya. Ya dasa awe wutua Héen. Ye awe ḳuhá. Achtawasaku gwal museum yeti. Ya chagudach aayí. Llaqt. Qajin kajaku ati. Kanachawe. Yakwas Adatawe yakwas Yeis atawe aguchlayech. Chashuguyach. Awe yeis at museum yideg ḳutaan. Ha aayí ḳuhá. Quchte ḳutaan ya ha anide. Ye owa achtawasaku. Ya yi inkachwanik. Yach ḳuhá adatawe yuchagachtullaat. Yach ḳuhá. Taakw.eetí. ḳutaan. Yeis. Táakw. Taakw.eetí. ḳutaan. Yeis. Táakw. Ye awe yach ḳuhá. daakw.eetí. Ya yidat gwal taakw.eetí ḳuhá. Chwasatin a ḳuhá we qa. Hastu yagu at has awachut. Hastu toasaku hinde. Hinich awe at wakuchu ya hastu yagu. A ḳuhátsu gwal asa. Qukade aya has yegachtus like ḳuhtaan. kade ye has a guchsane ya has du glade jishaguni glade huena kutlit a dasa tesla atina has utia yidat helpututsuko a one qanins helputusko one qanin suit like daakahídi ya Kayaaní Dísi Héen Táanáx Kayaaní Dísaya ya yidat Kayaaní Dísi ḳuhá ya deqna Héen aawatáw naakw yende yeke qwanne sacht qanaxawe achtuasagu sacht daayí jaxane ye awe ya kei naakw khatqa'a achtuasagu we itch aawatáw we sacht dalluni qanaxawe ganach a tella atinacha uti gwell sacht ituasagu aqaqunishi ye awecha ach tutat awe ḳutaan na daayín qayach qanaxawe yake we na daayín kina awe ka qanach yake a dekaki good a atinachi ḳutaan saag ḳuhán dugutin qanaxawe yake ajawe wushtuwanke hasyati aqaawe a atinachi qasha tlain qa qanch qa Héen llita gweil ye awe a atinachi khatqa we shukwa aya qone aya adati jaqone ye yaqqa sacht qani gunal chish haiti deshi achawe yikaqwahash ya hana guxsati aqaawe ya Héen adate awe kaxsaha aqaawe qanch akatetsu kakwasus aqaqone aya adati jaqone qashjas yatayach ye awe yikliyati a kakwahash taakw.eetí hechasaku asaduasaku at we Kayaaní qone aya ye qeqwahen ye awe tlallachtu ashku qone ye qeqanahueni ashukat ach kakwahash achu aawita das adat aya kakwataaq ya sacht ijiu qashyatayach qashtayk a decha aqa chagut yete kakwagut ldakát at achtuasagu aqwahashi tlachlitzini atawe aqa chaguta qal achjiu aqgweili qone shachlahik ya llitatin ye awe ituasagu yatayach we llita an aya kakgichas we daklakats gwell daklakats yiduasagu at we thorns tlallito ashku akayuti tsagwadyachyati dalluni tlallito ashku tsagwadyachyati atach Su yachyati at ḳuhá Kayaaní yachyati at yake adachaya achu aqanachawe has awshaguk gwell we llitatin qone kakgillid ldakát akade llid aqaawe adach kakgitseitl gwell yisaku aqa ituasagu weta uhuk kunsakshawe we uhuguye ituasagu. Aqaawe gwall ḳuhgweishtut gwall itch atut we hen gweil atlashe toa ushku. We hen we nagu atude yeka ḳuhá. Gwall tuas chat qa saat Héen. Tlaich tsacht atade achtuasagu. Gwall dech yagich anach qayan uane. Just at kakwadana. Just kakwadana. Tlaich at kakwadana. Aqa awe gwall tuasagu naaq yishayech. Tlaugu Héen. Kunachawe yata. Qaqone ya anashuk. Atade awe. Gwall tleqa winits qanach tleshetzin tin ya anashuk just chaye gugeng qayande yekakwadne we chayu yacheti. Gunal chish aqeti sa achi chach tuasaguyi in qachtatani taakw.eetí adat xuhá naakw qa ya haqusti ya qone aya adati jigachtune we qaaq yaw saak gaat ldakát atchai qa tleq qone aya yeqiq quhwin aqa awe gwall kanata waskan tlequ ldakatat achtu yeke yeis taakw.eetí gunal chish Ituagasagu Kayaaní. El pasa ǩuhá. Qadawuske ituagasagu qatqak iwusi. Ya hayu qatangida. Gosh adeyu ḳuhtaan ye. Tleqaqina el pasa ǩuhá.
Well, you were talking about a museum.
Right.
And I heard, unique and ʻatʻu. So I was just pulling words of kind of building my own meaning with the words that I could pick up.
Okay.
And then I think you were starting to talk about months or seasons.
Seasons. Yeah.
And then I started madly looking for a document to see if I could find some more words as you were speaking to try to piece it together.
Yay. Goodness cheese. Oh, where's that one? I got another one. Okay, so yeah, so I said I gave you guys some prep stuff and then I started somewhere else. So I said I was going to talk about like months and seasons and stuff. But then when I started the class, I started speaking. I said it's good to see everyone. I'm glad we're together. I'm thankful we're together. I think I said and then I think I started talking about, I don't know what's going to happen next Tuesday. Maybe Nawea wants to teach you folks, because I will be traveling to Princeton, and we'll be looking at some things in their collection and talking with some of their students. Then I said, I don't know what to call a museum, because I used to call it ʻdaakahídi, but I'm like, well, not everything's ʻatʻu. Maybe like some oil cans sitting in there, or and so then I started, I think, kasaye at daakahídi, but then like not everything in there is weird. And so ldakāt at daakahídi, like it's a house around everything. So I guess I still got to think about it because it's sort of like the remains of people, but it's complicated too because there's an awful lot of stolen stuff. So then I started thinking about another thing, which is the medicine people, the icht, they were the only ones who were not burned. Like most people were cremated. Like that's just the Tlingit way of doing things. You go back far enough. But they were, and I don't know if they were, I don't think they were really buried, but maybe they were. I have a theory that they've laid them on trees and then hollowed out a tree and put that over them. And they were the only ones who kept all their stuff. So they had a bunch of stuff, which we call icht, jishaguni, the tools of the medicine person. And they had all that stuff because they would come back as what's called yeik, a spirit helper. They would help the next generations of medicine people. And some of the folks who came here knew that and stole their stuff. And so that is where things get really complicated. And I know a friend of mine, he said he has some things that belong to an icht. And some people aren't sure what to do with that stuff anymore because maybe the medicine people don't exist right now. Not to say they won't or can't. And maybe they do. So then I said, we're going to be talking about a program where we might look at some things that are in a museum and then have the museum come up with the money to pay a master artist, a person's hands fits things together nicely, I think is how that translates. And so we would have a master artist, and some people that they are teaching. And they would go and look at some stuff, go back home, get everything they need, go back to the museum, and make a replica. So if you had a bentwood box, they would make a replica of that bentwood box. Whether it's exact or not is a negotiation, I think. But the museum funds this stuff. They do grant writing because people fall in love with this idea. And they will make one, and then they will leave it there and take the original one back home. So like this is the idea we're going to go sell to Princeton and other museums who have a bunch of our stuff. Because I get sad when I think about how much of our stuff museums have and the reasons why they have them. But then I said, I was going to talk to you about seasons, and those are called xuhá. And I'll pull out some documents to talk about seasons. I'll show you a couple things. I got a couple of time slideshows, so I can't remember what the second one was called. One is time and sequence, and the other one, maybe that's Tlingit time. Yeah, okay. So I found it. So this is called xuhá. Everybody say xuhá. xuhá.
ළakāt,
xuhá.
ළakāt,
xuhá.
ළakāt.
And that literally is like saying the time keeps coming for it, right? It keeps arriving. And that's the word for seasons. And then you do have, I don't know if I have them written down. I don't think I do. So the names of the seasons vary a little bit from place to place. But the way that I've learned them is taakw.eetí, which is, I guess I'll just add to this. So you have, and I kind of look at them in a certain order. Taakw.eetí, ḵutaan, taakw. Oh, I gotta make this smaller. And, yeis. So these are your seasons. This is how I think about them. Taakw.eetí, ḳutaan, yeis, taakw. Taakw.eetí, ḳutaan, yeis, taakw. So they do, they keep rolling. This one is the remains of winter, summer, which is related to fish jumping in a given space, yeis, which I think is related to perhaps discoloring, but I would expect an apostrophe there, and there isn't one. And then táakw, which is winter or a year. In my brain, taakw.eetí is sort of the starting point, because you get all your new foods, everything starts to wake up, everyone starts gobbling up all the winter foods and thinking about their summer plans, which involves getting more food, right? So that's like kind of a long established thing for Tlingit peoples, which is why I think people get excited by seasonal changes around here and also start thinking about the food cycles and everything. So I was kind of thinking about that stuff, and then I said, I think it's springtime. I see people driving around, dragging their boats around, wanting to put them in the water. I think people are maybe putting away some of their winter tools, like their snow shovels. But who knows, it might snow again. And then I was talking a little bit as we was wrapping up about foods, herring eggs, herring and hooligan, and then fish and berries and all kinds of stuff. And then we go into the hunting seasons and stuff. So yeah, any thoughts, questions?
I think the idea of carving a replica and leaving it with a museum and taking the original back is great.
Yeah.
Because they can take all the photos they want of the original before it goes home, as many of them as they want. And so they can have a digital image that's perfect, but not theirs.
It's really like this, some stuff has been repatriated and so it comes out of the museum. And I'm in favor of that. But I do think some curators feel like heartbreak because they've grown close to some things and they've cared for some things and they care about them. And so I think it's also a good middle ground to say, well, look, here's this, it's not the same thing, but it kind of is the same thing. And it's attached to this special story, I think, about returning things to the people.
If the artists can do the work in the museum, then the making of it is a performance piece for the museum, and they like that.
Yeah, and I think you have this better story, because I think a lot of folks who curate and understand the history and the culture know that it's complicated and usually mostly bad. Even if stuff was purchased, even if stuff was acquired by Tlingit peoples, like it's just really associated with a lot of taking and also this narrative that everybody was dying, so we had to take it all before they're all magically vanished, so. Get here.
An idea too. Well, it was Sitka maybe 10 plus years ago. They did was it Bering's granddaughter, great granddaughter, or whatever. They did a healing ceremony. Something along those lines too, where there's tribal representatives that would belong to, and then like the transfer make it, like a real thing.
Yeah.
And it's ceremony.
I think that brass hat came back, the peace hat. It was given to like the Tsar of Russia, and then it returned. And then having peace ceremonies too. We had one in Daya, which is right next to Skagway, because we had a big fight long time ago with another clan, and about control of the Chilkoot Trail. And so they came over and had a peace ceremony. It's really nice. So yeah, there's a lot of things. And I think Haida has been doing these ceremonies as well. Here's another thing I really enjoy, where they would take something like Mendenhall Glacier, and they would commission a bentwood box, and they would write down on a piece of paper Mendenhall Glacier, and then they would give it to the government and say, okay, we're returning this to you through ceremony, we respect what has happened, but the briefly known as thing is not going to happen anymore. We're going to restore the name of it to aawatáw, sit, and to whatever the names of these places might be. So there's another series of ceremonies that I'm looking forward to happening all over Kayaaní, so we can, Gastineau can have their name back, and Mendenhall, and all these other people who their names are on the land.
If they afford the opportunity, that could be really valuable. I tried to reproduce something a while back from just pictures that were on the museum's website, and so it's a real challenge to try and guess where you don't see or can't feel or touch or understand proportion. It's just, yeah, really valuable if that could be supported and funded.
Yeah, and to really get in there and not have gloves, to touch the thing, and then to make a new one, and then to have that one, and then people could wear gloves after, right? But this, for the artist, it's all about like learning the thing through bringing it back to life, which is really exciting. Okay, any language stuff you've been thinking about? Questions, thoughts, things you want to share?
Just the idea of museum, when you were talking about that, when I was doing my little deal on Old Groner and trying to say he was in the Kitchikan Museum, I just basically said it's in the library, but I couldn't find a museum, representative. Like I didn't really know like exactly how to say that. And I did say the library building.
Yeah, right. So, because we also had daakahídi used to be the name for library, post office, bookstore. And so when I was raising my kids in Tlingit, I'd say daakahídi de gáchtú, and she'd say the library. It's like daakahídi. The bookstore. It's like daakahídi. Post office. Yeah. So then we came up with different names for each of them. So Jinduhayi daakahídi is paper that people send by hand. So now that's the post office, Jinduhayi. And then I think it's daakahídi, the place where people, the building. So daakahídi means a house around the outside of something. And so daakahídi is, and so you can add that to whatever. Daakahídi for restaurant, daakahídi for bank. And then, well, I don't have to guess, I got them right here. So let me find her. Which will get us to a chapter on moving around. So I do think it's in this Kayaaní chapter, which maybe we'll do. There's a big old dialogue in front of it, so we'll do that. So Schoon has 3 names: Schoon or Shkoon, which comes from English. Atwaskh daakahídi, house around knowledge. Āaawatáw, place where people are taught. The place where people teach people. Then we get to town, which is On. I think of On as a village. Ka would be downtown. But I've also heard aayí and nu qay. But nu qay I don't think people use anymore. It really means in the fort, in the walls of the fort. Then Neish is a home. Daakahídi is a bookstore. ḳuhá is a library. Jinduhayi daakahídi is a post office. Daakahídi is a restaurant. Daakahídi is a bank. Daakahídi is a hospital or a clinic. In a lot of places, ʼakananeek is a smokehouse that comes from a verb, ḳutaan, which means to smoke fish, but some places call it ldakahídi or ldakahít, or they might call it ldakahít. A store is ldakahídi. A church is daakahídi, so it's the building around prayer, or church or church, which again both come from English. ʻakananeek is often associated with the Russian Orthodox Church.
One,
Ah,
doesn't that mean cross house?
yes, cross house. Okay. So the other thing, oops, let's see. Too many things open. So we're going to do a little translation exercise. We did this last night.
Renee,
Ah,
could I just ask? I don't know if you're familiar with boomwhackers. Yeah, the music. They're like long tubes that you hit.
oh,
I'll just share because I wanted it to start using these now that especially after spring break, wake the kids up, start hitting these things. And I didn't know if, I mean, it's a tube that you hit, and I was thinking maybe I could just call it the red one or the green one and just reinforce colors, or didn't know if there was something else that I could maybe. So we're going to be doing it all week. So if I was to do the red one, it would be on up, or how would I?
okay, well, let's,
And then the other question is, would it be guash, like hit, or
yes, it will.
Jeez.
Let's see. So let's build out some vocabulary. So this is a good exercise on like thinking about, uh, oh, hold on. I was having this problem in the last class, trying to talk and I can't talk and type at the same time. It's not that skilled. So thinking about how to bring language into a certain realm. Like we talked about this as a final project, which would be something 4 weeks from now. That would be, in theory, kind of ready. So one of the things that I would do, so this is the word that Kayaaní came up with for xylophone. So this means a drum that people club on. Really, it's so hish is the verb here, and this is the same one as a shawahich when we see in the mosquito story when people are clubbing each other on the head. Oh, yeah, each down. Let me catch your question in the chat too. Ďakút is a different one. What was I talking about? I think so. I was saying like, and then a different one, and then a different one, and so ďakút is a different one, and that's all it means. Ďakút is a different one, or another one. So one of the things that I would recommend for doing something like this is basically I would create these kind of two. Maybe they don't have to be even tables. So let's do it this way. So basically what we're going to have is we're going to have in order to be able to use the language somewhere, we got to know the nouns, and then we got to know the verbs. And we might have a separate one for like specific phrases, but I think if we just sort of started here, I think that's pretty good. So, well, let's just make this verbs and phrases. So, for example, if for colors, certainly, oops, I changed my font, sorry. I'm going to use this. So, ḳuhán is red. ʼakananeek is the phrase for saying it is red. So I would actually move ḳuhán over to here because it is a noun. It's not a verb. It's just this is the way you can talk about a color as a noun. Like to say red, blue, green, orange. But then you can't use this as any sort of descriptive thing. You have to now move it to ldakát. And then the next pattern from here is you have color noun. And when we use these squiggly things, it means a fill-in-the-blank type of thing. ldakát, noun. So now this is how you'd say some color of something. For example, how would I say white cat?
Play.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Dúsheachtaí gléit.
Just other way around. So ldakát, douche. So now our pattern has revealed itself. How would I say red dog? Because of Clifford. He doesn't have to be big though. He'll just be red.
Kayaaní céil.
Yep, so the color goes first. So then you get, and so the big part is like sort of seeing like this, like if I'm, well, I don't know, I can't make it white, so I guess I'll make it gray. And then I'll make this one kind of red. Or I guess maybe I could do it, can I make it, maybe I can go white with a black background. Okay, like ldakát douche on ldakát cake. But so here is the pattern. Color noun. So tsu ldakát, whatever, like ḳuhá, a green pencil or pen. And so here's, so this is how we get sort of a pattern. And so now we say káaaní, which I think, so these plastic tubes, you hit them or do you hit them against each other? Do you hit them sort of like a xylophone? Do you hit them with a mallet type of thing?
No, you actually, it's a tube that you hit, you hold on to it, and then you hit it on the ground. So it's the tube itself that you whack on the floor.
So now if we put on, káaaní, so on is a contraction of aayí. And aayí is with it. We're going to make this, maybe I'll go like this. So aayí, and then you have káaaní. So with it, people club something, right? And so actually with it, people club it something. So it's something that people club things with. So that's one potential name for it because you sort of club things with it and it makes a sound. Is that right? Okay. And then it could get more complicated because you're making musics and sounds, but maybe we'll just leave it at that. And so we'll say this is thing people club with. And then, so the verb you're going to be using, so gwash would be to hit it, but it's sort of like, So gouache has three different meanings as a verb. So as a verb, it means to hit something with a closed fist. It means to hit something with like beating a drum, and it also could be uh, for a bell to ring, someone to knock on a door, or to stab someone. So it's all about kind of like this stabby type of motion. But I think in the absence of a drumstick, I don't think it works. So I think you're going to end up with this xish verb. So then you're going to have all your colors, and then you're going to say, let's see, let me check the verb database. I think it's here. So the verb we're looking for is xiich. And there is clubbing someone on the head. But if we just change that sh to ka, then I think we're fine. Kahich and kaihich.
Unai,
Ah,
what is the cut doing there?
yeah, that's,
Hitting it on the surface
yes.
and making, is hitting it on the surface, is that why that makes the sound? Or do lots of things get hit on the surface? Do lots of things, cut appears in lots of verbs.
Yeah, ka is all over and sometimes it's just sort of like to tell something, it has ka on there, the horizontal surface. So sometimes it doesn't make sense, but then kayer is to plane something, like to take a planer and to plane it flat. And so like, okay, because yer is to make it, kayer is to plane it. So that one kind of makes sense. So sometimes you can really see that horizontal surface, but then sometimes not so much. But this one, yeah, so you could have shachich, and that's club it on the head. And then you have kachich, would mean club it onto a flat surface. So it's more like you're hitting it downwards to hit something that's kind of flat. That's what I would think.
Jeez.
Ah, okay.
Doesn't each color have two meanings?
Yeah, there's a noun, and then there's also wait.
With one exception.
Oh, what's that?
One exception,
What's that?
the colors.
Oh,
They all have two meanings except, I think, blue.
well, cheshk is that little it's a Stellar's J, and then cheshk, but that's like a dark blue. Uksha.
Ash is blue.
Mm-hmm. And then chat yacheti is a light blue, and then chat is the sky. Sheesh. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to talk to you folks about is I've been thinking a lot about speaker levels and abilities and how to talk about this stuff in Tlingit. And got a number of ideas from different folks who are working in some Algonquin languages, in Dena'ina. Joel Isaac and I talked quite a bit about this stuff. And then made a couple of illustrations, shared them with some folks through social media, got some feedback, and got some really good feedback from Ernestine Hayes on Kashacht, who really likes this metaphor. So if we're using this metaphor, people are sort of, and there's some different ways we can sort of look at this. So we have usani, which is a cone from a pine or a spruce tree. Ākakeedi, which is a seed. Aayí, which is a sapling, as, clean, aawatáw, as. So I would expect y'all to be identifying as trees pretty soon. And then, so basically, someone goes from, I think ʻusani is sort of like little kids who are in a language program, or some folks who are just brand new to the language. You just get to be a pine cone or a spruce cone. And then you become a seed as you sort of start to learn the language, you're kind of on your journey, and this is sort of maybe about halfway through year one. And then you become a sapling. And you should be a sapling kind of by the end of year one. And you kind of stay a sapling for a while. And then you become a tree. And even though you're a tree, that doesn't mean you're a full-grown tree, but you're a tree. And I think you've been doing this for maybe a couple years now, and some maybe longer. And then there's no real set amount of time when you sort of move from being a tree to being a big tree. But a big tree is typically those who are at the end of year 3 have mastered the majority of the concepts that are being sort of presented there. And then yen aawatáw as is like the full-grown tree. Like you are there, you are continuing to add, but you can certainly say most things you want to say and understand most things that you hear. And then this is a visual representation of our journey so that we can eventually start talking about this stuff in Tlingit and then talking about the steps. You know, I think even if you think of trees, like these steps tend to go quite a bit faster, and then this is the long, slow growth. Not to say that everyone's going to have a long, hard road, but for some it might take a little while to sort of grow into that. But I don't want to be insulting to anybody either by having these sort of concepts of immaturity in there or anything like that. But then the other thing that I like that we were talking about is there's a ldakát leader named Táanáx, Austin Hammond, who used to say, if you look up at on the mountains, yeis xuhání, ʼakananeek, wasake hasuwa yag, gwashidzi, just te akach aya, ʻkanach gleit qatlan, ʻkanach khasi taakw. Yisikuge wasa, hasquzatiyuch, atqitayich awe, wushjin has alshat, ya hastuchati, wushjin yachyati, awe haqusti. So he would say, if you look up on the mountaintops, you might see these trees growing, and you might think, how can a tree grow way up there? It's really rocky, it's cold, the snow gets super deep. And he would say, the way those trees survive is underneath the soil, they're holding each other's hands. Those roots are intertwined and growing together, and that's how our culture is. So there's a group of us that really like this as a visual metaphor, but then I have two others, which I think I've shared with you folks, which is one going into the water, one going up the mountain. Again, people just getting started, daakw, they're around the mountain. Those who've been doing this for a while, like you folks, yaakw, you're getting to the steep part of the mountain, and shakiqw, the ones on top of the mountain. Then again, a different one could be Héen ʼayaqw, people at the edge of the water. Héen taakw, which would be Yohan, people in the water, and then ʻeetqw, the people down on the halibut hole. And so you can choose your metaphor, because some people like the water, like, yes, I'm going in the water. But then other people say, well, I feel like I'm drowning in that example. So we can go to the mountaintop, or we can go to the tree. So just thinking of different ways for folks to self-identify and for us to talk about. Because eventually we want to sort of shift to talking about this stuff in Tlingit, and talking about where people are and what they might need, and what's going to help push them to the next phase. thoughts, ideas, questions?
Still like the mountain and water metaphor, as it's more experiential in its description, where the tree stages feel like just a static object, even though they demonstrate levels of growth.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we'll keep all three, and then there's people can kind of maybe we'll add more. There'll be like a whole bunch. It could be like a little fish fry and be like a little tadpole. But anyway, I just think about this stuff a lot, and then just trying to visualize it and give people encouragement as they keep going, because we are going to start translating stuff from English to Tlingit, and then from Tlingit to English. English. If I say Tlingit first, I say English. I should be saying English. So let's try a few of these and then we'll take our break. So maybe we'll try the first one where we're going from English to Tlingit. So how would I say, where are you walking to?
Gudese Yanigat.
Gude sa yanikit ye awe. So there's gude sa ya nikut. Now if you have speakers from Tessin, they might say se right there. But then that ya ni gut is two different words. This is four words. Gude sa ya ni gut. But the ya ni gut kind of runs together. So how about, where did you walk to?
Gudesa Yawugut.
It's very close. But that ending is going to be a little bit different.
Oh, is it Gut? Yeah.
Gut, well, sorry, not the ending, the prefix. The prefix should be a little bit different. Gudesa. Ye gut. Gudesa ye gut.
Yeah, I was doing, so Wugut would be he, would they?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
And then ye, but in some cases it would be iya, but in this case it's ye. And we will learn these. We will learn these. We'll also learn how to put these together. But you were right on with everything else. Everything else was there. Where will you walk to?
Gudesa ikugut.
So yeah, we have ḳuhá is a third person. So it goes to ḳi. Gudesa ķiqut. So everybody, let's try this first one. Gudesa yani gut.
Desa yani gut.
Gudesa yani gut.
Desa yani gut.
Gudesa yani gut.
Desa yani gut.
Gudesa ye gut.
Desa ye gut.
Gudesa ye gut.
Desa ye gut.
Gudesa ķiqut.
Desa gut.
Gudesa ķiqut.
Desa gut.
So this one, if you didn't have the sa in front of it, you would have ga, qi, gut. Those would be, so the gaqi would be you are going to. Gut is going to be the verb root. It's going to be long and high. Futures are always long and high. But this sa causes contraction, and one of the things that will happen is this vowel is going to fall out, and this G will revert to a K, which suggests that it's a K to begin with, and that vowel changes it. But that's getting into some of the weeds. So, gudesakqigut is the future form for that one. Who is going to be there?
Adu saya good.
That's who's gonna go there. Which, you know, is still in that, it's in that neighborhood, but we're gonna move to a different verb for being somewhere.
Oh, is it the T verb?
It is the T verb.
Adu saya ʼqueetí.
Yeah, a do sa, and then we're gonna have yay. And so here's another thing. So we should expect a do sa, and we know we're gonna end up with the yeis is that verb, yeis. So we would have ďaakahídi, but the yay ends with a vowel, so it's gonna do the same thing. Turn this to a K. Right, so that's that magic contraction, ga to K, ga to K. So now we're gonna start looking at these individual pieces and what happens when they start to contract, because they do so in really predictable ways, but there's like several different things. So once we learn those patterns, we'll start to see it. So the only part that's missing is the there part. So there is a way that Tlingit takes care of this to say like that place we were talking about, there, that place, and then you could put a whole bunch of suffixes on this one as well, but it's not going to have any in this case. Any predictions on what that might be?
Away.
Away is a good prediction. What we're going to look for is ah. So this is something that Tlingit uses quite a bit to say like, once you've named a place, like if I said, Deislin, aawatáw, Tessin, we were there, but it switches to after that. And is the same thing that's in ade, adach. There's a whole bunch of them that sort of contract in different ways. And then the other one is the next one down, where it's gonna, I think it should take on this form of ach. And that'll be the last thing we say in the next sentence. So who is going to be there? Adusa aawatáw. Everybody try. Adusa aawatáw.
Dusa aayí ḳuhá.
Adusa aawatáw.
Dusa aayí ḳuhá.
Adusa aawatáw.
Dusa aayí ḳuhá.
What are we going to eat there?
Dasa.
Dasa. What we are gonna. Or we can go right to the verb root, and then we could put the other part together.
Is this one gonna have two verbs?
No, it's just gonna have one.
Just the one? Okay.
So,
So it'd be the eating verb rather than the going verb?
yep.
Okay.
Dasa, we are going to eat. And then it's gonna end with ach. That's how you do the there part. Dasa.
Verb.
Is it gonna have a guga? Guga.
So what
Gugaha
we're gonna end
or
up
gugaha?
ga qa t 0 ha. And we're gonna put all these pieces together. Because this one, when you have ga, so the ga will stay. The y gets absorbed. when you take the vowel out of qa, it will always become. So now we have gach. When tu encounters a classifier with no vowel, it goes long. Gach tu xa. We're gonna eat it. Everybody say gach tu xa.
ʼakananeek,
Gach tu xa.
ʼakananeek,
Gach tu xa.
ʼakananeek.
Now we can do all kinds of things. Gach tu at. Kagach tu neek. Kagach tu ak. Yagach tu ldakát. All that stuff. Gach tu, gach tu, gach tu, gach tu. That one will be the only thing that will change in this one is whether this vowel is long or short. Gach tu, gach tu, gach tu, every time. And we are going to piece through the perfective in the future so that you will, once you see a verb, you'll know how to move it. You'll just know how to move it. Gach tu saku, we're going to know. Gach tu shaguk, we're going to know how to do it. Dasa gach tu cha'ach,
ʼakananeek,
dasa gach tu cha'ach,
ʼakananeek,
dasa gach tu cha'ach.
ʼakananeek.
Okay. So everybody's right on track. Like a bunch of the components are there. We're just sort of seeing some of these pieces to put in there. And then all of these futures, you're going to know how to do a whole bunch of them. And you'll see this gachtu, ḳuhá, ḳuhí, and you'll see this, all these patterns are going to repeat themselves. Any questions?
How would you say what is going to be there?
Oh, you would change adu to da.
Duh. Oh,
Dasa aayí. What is going to be there?
okay.
You can also say who is going to eat there, and then you can start putting these around into different, start moving them around. Okay. Okay, take a break. Come back at 10 till. We're going to go from Tlingit to English. And I will leave those up in case you want to take a look at them. How? Dasaway hayukatangi atut. Ay jishagun kutzati. Hayukatang shagun aya atuyeti. Yidekakwane kata. Tatatoashku achaki khilqa. Takanaaq. Aqaawe achtuasaku yisaku chaltakat atawe hayukatangi tut. Chaltakat. So, I want you all to understand everything that's in the language. Everything. Every single thing. But it's a bit of a haul to get there. So we're going to look at the components that are in a Tlingit verb. And I want you to be scared of it. And it says it's a monster. But look how cute that little monster is. He's so cute. And so this is just trying to have a little bit of fun because sometimes grammar work does get people get a little nervous. But I found this little picture of a brain working out, and it says, kakki'aq, yakkitlaq. You're going to try, you're going to succeed. And then it says, itqi, your brain. Kaynaltinoe hayuqatangi. Our language is gaining strength. Up here it says, taakw', I will try. Yakqitlaq, I will succeed. This is from Kayaaní, Nora Dowenhauer. She said, you improve it by using the Tlingit language. Ask questions if you got them. These are the color patterns we're going to be using for these parts of speech. We have the Tlingit verb phrase is most commonly made up of these parts: the preverb, object, thematic, conjugation, subject, classifier, stem. We will go through these in detail, but the biggest thing that you learn how to do is you learn how to predict what the prefix will be, which is all of this, and then you predict what the stem will be, which is the vowels. Will it be short and high? Will it be long and high? Will it be long and low? The preverb is a spot before the verb where separate words exist. This does include some objects. These are words that once you remove them, you have changed the meaning of the verb. So it could be an adverb, it could be a motion type of thing, it could be to completion, a whole bunch of things that get signaled in here. And I'm working on a little handbook for the verb components game, so you'd have a color-coded version of these big tables that exist in other places. The object is the one that the verb happens to. Usually, there are some cases where you'll use an object pronoun for the subject. For example, ha shuwaguk. We ran around. Ha is the object pronoun marking the subject. But that's unusual. So an object is the one the verb happens to, right? It fell on me, it hit me, kissed me, or talked to me, like a whole bunch of these things. That's the one it happens to. The thematic is a noun that you can put onto a verb. Sha is a head, ka is a mouth, ya is a face or vertical surface, ka is a horizontal surface or on something, j are hands, sh is the end of something. You can have up to 3 of these. It's pretty rare, but there are verbs that have 3.
Renee, if there are multiple thematic prefixes, is there a certain order that they must occur in? They can't swap that order.
Can't move them around. It must go that one, then that one. And we'll look at them. We'll look at them, and then I'll show you lists that have them. And then what we start with this one is the most common stuff. So there's a whole bunch of stuff, like you could put a finger in a verb, a foot. You could put any body part you want to in a verb. So have fun with that. But we'll just do the most common ones. Okay. The conjugation is where you kind of activate prefixes to put the verb into a certain mode. We say modes to say like perfective mode, future mode, hortative mode, command mode. So this is where the verb begins to change. You want to boss someone to do it, make them do it. You want to say, let us do it. Gach is all this plus that. And there's, I think, 4 different spots where things can be activated in here. And we got lots of illustrations for all of these things. So it's sort of like, for some people, they like the water thing or the mountain thing or the tree thing. For here, you're going to have this picture with little tables. You're going to have one that shows like these dials, so you could turn these knobs. And then there'll be other ones too. So we'll have plenty of different ways to look at them because some of them might connect when other ones are missing. Next comes the subject, and they always will come in this order. So this, like you'll say, taakw. So ka, ga, u. aq. I will try. So the ka always has to go right here. Aawatáw, I succeeded. Ya, ya, ldakát. So the other thing we'll start doing is looking at verbs and showing you the pieces that are being activated in here, how they're interacting with each other. There is a bunch of stuff here, but there's only so many options, right? The subject is the one who does the verb. I do it, you do it, they do it, people do it, we do it, those types of things. The classifier goes right here. We're going to talk about that, exactly what it is, exactly what it does. Tlingit might have the most active classifier of the Dene languages. I was going to these indigenous meetings and I would notice this thing where people would be like, I'm not trying to brag, but our people were the best hunters. We were the best. I was like, that's actually bragging. So I just laughed because that happens to me quite a bit. Like I was at a meeting just a while ago and someone's like, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but we were the best basket makers. We were the best. It's like, okay. So our classifier is the most complicated. I'm not trying to brag about our classifier, but it's the most, it does the most. Okay, and we'll talk about what it does. Then you have the stem, and when we say stem, we're only talking about the vowel. The root is the meaning. Teen is the root. Teen, teen, tin, that's the stem. Okay, so when we say stem, we're talking about what the vowel does. We're talking about root, we're talking about the meaning. Any questions about these? We're going to go through each one in 5 minutes or less. Just kidding. Okay, so how does this stuff, how does it work? So one of the things is when you start to look at a verb, oops, I want to make sure that I get the chat open. That's right. I'm usually real quiet when people say that stuff. Like, well, actually, we were the best. Okay. So when you look up a theme, here's some things that I want you to sort of just start to note. When you see something in parentheses, it means it's optional. It might not be there, but there's times where you kind of need it to be there. Then it's going to show you whether or not there's a thematic prefix on there. If you put one on there, it's a whole new verb. It changes the verb if you change that thematic prefix. If you add one, change it, remove it, it's a different verb. And some of them, this is why we don't, I don't think we could ever document all of the verbs, because you could keep changing this to a whole bunch of things. Not in every single verb, but a lot of them you can. So, and this has meaning. Ḳuh means something. It means sort of like a given area or space. Then you get to the classifier. The classifier changes what the verb does. So we might talk about agency. That means it's not that way, somebody made it that way. Yak'e, it's good. Yishik'e, you made it good. You improved it. So sometimes that's what the classifier does. Say, it didn't just happen, somebody made it happen. Sometimes the classifier puts things into categories. It's a living thing, it's a non-living thing. It's an empty thing, it's a full thing. It does that kind of stuff. That's why it's called a classifier. Sometimes it will show what we call reflexive, so doing it to the self, right? Talk to myself, poked myself, cut myself, wrote on myself, talk to myself, any of those things, that will be reflected in the classifier as well. And then sometimes it's going to talk about, transitivity and agency are kind of the same thing. Whether it's an object, well, there's some of them, there's an object and it kicks the object out, right? So for example, ḥaqīs, I am sewing it. I'm sewing this mask. But ḥaddaqīs, I'm sewing. I'm just telling you what I'm doing, okay? We'll look at examples of all of this stuff.
Ḵuhá,
Ah,
are the colors connected to the slide before?
these ones, no.
Okay, okay.
But when you look it up in the dictionary, these will just be blue. And so, but we could someday perhaps color code all of that. We'll see. But that's a lot of work if you want to color code individual components in the dictionary. So that'll be for the person who does dictionaries after me.
They,
Huh.
what you'll do is you'll get a piece of software to color code it.
Oh yeah, right. Well, we have dictionary software that you can build all that stuff in. You could. Okay, I'll think of it. Okay, so the next thing is the root. So this is the meaning. So in this case, T is to be. Yeah, you could see, and in the dictionary software, like all of these things are coded as separate things. So you could. I'll try it. I'll see what it looks like. Okay. And then, but I don't. But yeah, for some people, like it's already complicated enough. And now when people start coming, they're like, "Why is this different colors?" You know. So, but I'll try it and we'll see what it looks like. We'll test. I'll bring a test in on Thursday. So then you might have a little H. The little H, I think I actually put these. Is that the order I go in? I think I go the number and then I go oops, okay. Anyway, those might be flip-flopped in the dictionary. What the letter H does is it's telling you about the stem variation. So you have ones that don't go low. You have open ones. You have open ones that stay low in certain situations. Then you have ones that don't change at all. So like ḥan never goes long. It's always short and high. Then you might have a little number 1 here, which means there's another T. There's a T root that means to handle objects. There's another T root that means to expect somebody or something like that. Then you have some information in here. This tells you the conjugation type. These are associated with sort of general meaning. 0 verbs usually have some sort of definitive end or goal. Na verbs don't. They don't specify an ending point. Ga verbs are an upward type of thing. Qa verbs are a downward type of thing. However, most of the state verbs are ga. And it's just how it works. So I don't know, you can sort of really get into the deep philosophical sort of underpinnings of that if you want to. But that's why you say Kayaaní, Kayaaník, Kayaaní. That K in front of it is directly related to ga. And if you have qa, then it's going to be ye. Ye undagan, ye iqwasatin. And these are dictated by the rules of Tlingit grammar.
So Ḳuhá, you were saying that ga that's in the future, those are those two classifiers working. Like I always thought it was just one that could only ever be, but for future it's the two together, correct?
Every future ga verb must have k in front of it. Every future qa verb must have ye in front of it. Every future 0 and na don't need anything in front of it. But you will hear sometimes as people are learning, they'll just guess. They'll just throw a K in front of something, just like taakw. It's like, okay, you don't need that. But it's just sort of like as you're figuring out those rules, those things. And so it's like all this stuff is kind of coded in here. And what's amazing to me is when you talk to birth speakers and they just know this stuff. Like I don't understand, like, but I also don't understand how languages work. It's just fascinating to me. There's all kinds of stuff that people do in English that they probably couldn't explain to you, and then, yeah, okay. There are 5 types of verbs: motion verbs, act verbs, event verbs, state verbs, position verbs. A motion verb is for something to move. Those ones, the thing that's special about them is they can be any 4 of these. They could change their conjugation type. So you could say, adenagu, go over there. And you could say, nehu, come in. The first one was na, the second one was 0. You could say, yagagu, get going, get walking. And that one's ga. Act verbs are for someone to do something, usually to something. And those ones are probably the most, well, they have an imperfective, right? An event verb means for something to happen, there is no imperfective. There's like this time when it didn't happen, and this time when it did happen. There's no in between.
One,
Ah,
are weather verbs event verbs?
they are usually state verbs.
State verbs, so what's the difference?
A state verb means for something to be a certain way, and it can have an imperfective. The only ones with imperfectives are act, state, and position. An act verb that's imperfective, the classifier will always be minus I. The state verb perfective or imperfective will always be plus I, because it must be that way to be that way. So that's why you say yak-a, shitsin, yanik. The position verb is the most rare. It means for something to be located somewhere, and it only has an imperfective.
One, in terms of for students to understand what these 5 types are, it would be useful to have 3 or 4 examples of each.
Okay. Yeah, and we will.
In Tlingit and English.
Okay. Yeah, and we will look at examples of each of these if you folks want to keep going. But if you want to shift to something else, we can.
Ḳuhá, could you give me just an example of position? Because I forget which document it was, but it didn't even, it just said use the acronym SAME. Like it didn't even mention P. And I was like, oh, okay, that must mean that it's not that used, or I was just curious.
Okay, let me see. Where do I have some examples? Okay. Maybe I don't have. Okay. So position verbs would be like ḳuhá, I'm sitting. Right? So you can only say ah. Ah, they are sitting. Ea, you are sitting. Ḳuhá, I am sitting. There's a related verb for sha'a, a building is located there. That is the only way that you can use that verb, is to say, I'm sitting here. And you could say where it's at. Ya ḳuhá. And that is a position verb. So when we go and look at some of these, so we'll scroll up to the verb. So this is to sit. So this says position right here, position, position. So for example, to be seated. No, this is not moving. So ḳuhá, ea, aa. Oh, so of course it's got a negative. Well, it's got a negative. All right. Well, most of these only have an imperfective. And so there would be a motion verb. So the motion verb, the one that talks about the act of sitting down, would be qanu. Qanu, wunuk, yek qanuk. So that one has to do with the action of sitting. This one just means to be seated somewhere.
One, does this refer to sitting with a body or simply being located in a place?
It means to be seated at a place.
So
Or
it
just to
does,
be sitting as well.
but it means to be to have a body and the body is sitting?
Yes,
I mean, a building can have a body too,
right.
but, okay,
So yeah, so this wouldn't work for like a chair.
okay.
This wouldn't work, for like a box, right? So this has to do with a person. And it's also singular. You have a plural version, which is ḳeen. So this is usually noted here, like so you say like, you see here it says, for singular S to be seated. And then you go down here and it says, for the plural verb is ḳeen. So you go down and look at that one. So what I'll do, I guess I don't have a thing. So I'll make another page that has examples of each of these verb types and starts to sort of get us to think about them. So here it is. So here's the position verb. You do have a related event verb, and this is why you say taakw, sit down. But for plural things to be seated, you have tuqeen, we are sitting. Yaqeen, y'all are sitting. Hasqeen, aqeen. But these are, and so the position verbs they're very rare. Because, but you can use them for another example. So these are sitting. You can also have standing. Does anybody know how to say, I am standing?
ḳuhán.
ḳuhán. So we're going to look up han. And so we're going to go down here, and here is the position verb. So when we click on position, and we go down, ḳuhán, ihán, hun, ahun. I am standing. But that's the only way you can really use this verb. So there is gidahan. So that is an action, to stand up. But Tlingit separates those two things. We're not talking about the act of standing up. We are talking about, hey, what are you doing? Standing. Like you could say that. Ḳuhán. But you can also use this to say, idat yan ḳuhán. I'm supporting you. I'm standing around you. So this can be used for other things like that. And then what about we are standing? Because here's another singular. So then you could find it. Well, how do you tell multiple people to stand up?
Gadahan.
That's one person. You all
Kayaaní.
Daakah. So let's go look up knock. Maybe we'll find two verbs there for plural things to stand. So here's stand. Oops. So here's the position verb and the event verb. So the event verb is for it happened, and then you could say tunak, we are standing. Yinak, hasnak, they are standing. But again, it's not, you can use it, certainly. You could say they are standing there. Like maybe that's part of the story. They're standing on the beach. So we have to sort of establish that for the next thing that's going to happen. Okay. Okay. Verbs also have transitivity. So what that is talking about is just saying, is there an object or is there a subject? Is there both? Is there one? Are there none? The weather verbs don't have objects or subjects because you didn't make it rain. You didn't make the sun shine, right? So it just happens. So you have transitive, which means there's an object and a subject. In the Tlingit Verb Dictionary, if you looked up a verb, in the parentheses, you would see TR. And that just means you got to remember to keep the object and subject in there. You can have subject intransitive, which means there's only a subject, there's no object. They mark that as letters IN. I should put that, I'll put examples in here. Thursday we'll look at some examples of that as well. What does the verb dictionary show for that? That just means you cannot add an object there. Object intransitive, there's only the object. You cannot add a subject. ḳuhá, there's no object in there, or subject in there, sorry. So they mark that one as ST for state in the verb dictionary, the yellow dictionary. And then impersonal, they mark as IM, which means there's no object, there's no subject. That's what this is, a weather verb. Okay. So let's look at some examples of how a verb might change. So here's a verb that we've all probably heard, yati. Wasa'iyati, yachatyati, aayí, right? Shqagwekhatyati. So what we're going to do is we're going to show this verb in an imperfective, negative imperfective, perfective, future, hortative, and a command. This same verb goes through these types of changes. Everybody just say it. Yeyati,
Yeyati.
keshyeuti,
Yeyuti.
yewuti,
Yewuti.
yekwati,
Yekwati.
yenqati,
Yenkati.
yeinati.
Yeinati.
So if we look at this thing, the ye is there in all of them. One of them we get klesh, which must come before the ye. Now the next thing we're going to look at is what is going on in the prefix. Ya, wu, ḳuhá, nqa, ina. So we can learn how to spot all of these things. This has 0 ya. This has 0 0. This has 0 y, ya. This has 0 g, qa, 0. This has 0 na, qa, 0. And the first 0 is the object, the second 0 is the classifier. And this one has I, so the object is you, na, 0. The last thing we look at is what's going on with the stem. T, 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 t. Long and low, short and high. Long and low, long and high. Long and low, short and high.
Kune, is it possible to put that little intermediary step in between just to help to learn the shorthand or the contraction? I'm gonna choose.
So this right here we call the segment. So segmenting means we're going to pull it apart so we can see all of the things that are there. And then this process does allow us to start to begin to recognize all of these components. And then I will tell you what they all are. And then we have na. So, whoops, I stopped doing the root. So the zeros on the front here going all the way down are it or they. It's a third person object. This has an object in there, so you cannot remove it. It just has to, but the third person is unmarked in this case. So this could be they are that way, they aren't that way, they were that way, they will be that way, let them be that way, you be that way. So that's the one that has to be you. But this could also be it. It is that way, it isn't that way, it was that way, it will be that way, let it be that way. Okay, so that's what the zero is doing. Now let's go through the next thing. Like the T we know is the root. The vowel is being marked as the stem. This has a plus I classifier because every time you see it as ya, that means it is that way. That's what the plus I marks in the classifier, is that it happened or it is that way. Okay? So then we have which means there's some logical disagreement. All negative forms will have We call it the irrealis. It just means it's marking that there's something that's not lining up. It will also be in every future form because it's basically specifically saying it's not that way or it hasn't happened. So that's where you're getting there. The zero over here means the classifier does not have the I component in it. This is the natural state of this classifier, 0, 0, 0, 0. The positive imperfective state and the positive perfective will be ya. Almost everything else is 0. The y is the perfective marker. That's not a past tense marker. That says, let's look at this verb in terms of whether or not it happened. Ga, qa. Ah,
Sorry, and so it became a W because it's following a vowel, correct?
so this sound would be ng, ng. That sound has almost completely fallen out of Tlingit, except in Teslin and Ḵuhán. But even before that, this will almost always just become a W. The exception is when you have a second person singular or plural subject. So that's when you get ye gut, ye ot. So you have a perfective marker there, but it's being turned into a Y. That's why we mark it with those 2 dots. That means it might become a W, but it might become a Y. It's a little bit soft. Ga, and qa mark the future. Those 3 must be on every time. In this case, this ga and this qa are not linked to anything specific in the verb. Like that conjugation class that we talked, the conjugation type doesn't matter. Ga, qa, future, every single time. That's why you get ǩaqwa, gahtu, gaqwa, because those 3 things must always be there. The hortative will have qa and then whatever the conjugation type is. So that's why you got to sort of remember that. So you'll say qatuha, let's eat it. But you'll say nakhtu'at, let's go. And you'll say gahtu, what do you say? Gahtushat, let's catch it, let's grab it.
Sorry. And so that yequati, like the reason that was contracted is because of the 3 vowels, right? That rule. You can't have 3 vowels in a row, correct?
Yeah, so if you took this yequati and if you change this to yach, like you're saying, it's going to be a certain color. This can't be ḳuhá now. It's got to expand to ḵuhá. What causes the contraction is that yay is in the pre-verb, so it affects whatever comes after it. Yay, ya, ke, those will always cause, they will just become, they're written as separate words, but they act like part of the prefix, which is really interesting in Tlingit. And you'll have some other things that do that. Yay inati. Okay, that was a fast 10 minutes. I don't know, that was, that got sneaky. But what I want to show, and I'll put this whole slideshow up. You can look at it. We're gonna go through this. Well, and if you're asking for examples, I'll make a whole bunch of stuff with a whole bunch more examples in it, because I think the examples is where the stuff starts to make sense. So as we first start to look at this stuff, we're like, what? What is all this stuff and these things and that thing and then these things in this combination? Whatever, but it does start to make sense. And what we'll do is we'll start looking at some of them one at a time. And so we'll start looking at some examples. Here's this, here's that, here's this. But for example, so see these? Yati, uti, wuti, ḳuhá, nakati, inati. You could change some things to be there. Āayí, ʻakananeek, āawátáw, ʻakananeek, ʻakananeek. That's to be located somewhere. And then you could change these all to place names. ḥuná, it was at Huna. You can have to be a color. Tsuyachyati, tleshtsuyachyuti, tsuyachwuti, tsuyachkukati, tsuyachnakati, tsuyachinati. Be green. I don't know why you would say that. Be green. But now you know how to say it. Two more. Héen etinech yati, klesh héen etinech uti, héen etinech wuti, héen etinech kukati, héen etinech nakati, héen etinech inati. Which again, some of those you would be weird to say, but just showing you grammatically, once you've learned this verb, you can actually learn how to do all of these different things. And there's the weather one, but we'll do that some other time. And it's a big step, it's a big bite. Just chew on it a little bit. When we come back Thursday, we'll do something else, fun, distracting, and then we'll dive back into this stuff and start looking at some of these individual components and how we start changing them in specific examples of how they work. Goodness, sheesh. Pulling you into the deep water. That's my goal. Put anchors in your shoes. Let them eat cake. Okay, we back. Goodness, cheese.
Gonna cheese.
Sheesh.
Oh.